See up us,
There we are.
there we are.
There we are. Now we're
Thanks,
on
Philip.
here. Good evening. I would like to call to order the Budget Committee for the City of Keizer for fiscal year 2022 and 2023 and ask our city recorder to please call roll.
Kathy Clark,
Present.
Gerard Graveline, Roland Herrera,
He is excused.
Kyle Duran,
Here.
Daniel Kohler,
Here.
Susan London,
Here.
Melissa Martin, here, Ali Ruzuli, Laura Reed,
Here.
Francisco Salvador. It's not, he's out of town.
He's out of town, so he's excused.
Hirsch Sangster, Elizabeth Smith,
She is excused.
Shaney Starr,
Here.
and Jonathan Thompson.
Here.
Thank you all very much. Before we get to the election of the Budget Committee Chair and Vice Chair, it's my pleasure to welcome Guillermo Rodriguez from the Volunteer Coordinating Committee to do our presentation for Volunteer Appreciation.
Thank you very much. Well, yes, I am here on behalf of the Volunteer Coordinator
Can you
Committee.
pull the microphone?
I need the
toward you?
microphone.
We have people watching on television.
Well, I have been told that I have a good face for radio, so this is perfect. Again, I'm here on behalf of the Volunteer Coordinating Committee to thank you for all the work that you do as a budget committee. And we know that your work is very valuable, and we appreciate it. And as a token of appreciation, we have some candy for you guys. So again, thank you on behalf of the Volunteer Coordinating Committee, and thank you for allowing me to be here today.
Thank you for coming, and thank you to all the volunteers who put so much effort into this work for the budget. Thank you very much. The next order of business is the election of the Budget Committee Chair and Vice Chair.
Yes.
And I would like to nominate for chair this year. It is to be a city councilor, and the vice chair is to be a citizen member. This is our policies for the leadership for the Budget Committee, and I'd like to nominate Councilor Laura Reed as chair.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to elect Laura Reed as the chair of the Budget Committee. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, signify by saying no. No objection, motion passed unanimously. Councilor Reed, the floor is yours as chair.
Thank you. I'd like to entertain nominations for the vice chair. I nominate.
I would like to nominate Melissa Martin as the vice chair for the Budget Committee for this year.
Second.
Need a second?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that Melissa Martin hold the position of vice chair for the Budget Committee meeting for the fiscal year 2022-23. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, welcome to the floor. All right, so our first item of business is to approve the budget calendar, which is on page 16 of your packet.
Madam Chair, I move approval of the budget calendar for fiscal year 22-23.
Any second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the budget calendar for 2022-23. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item of business is the approval of the fiscal year 2021-22 budget committee minutes. What's that?
I move that the Budget Committee approve the Budget Committee meeting minutes for 21-22.
Any seconds?
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item of business is the city manager budget message. I'm going to turn that over to Mr. Wood.
Thank you, Committee Chair. I was going to have Mr. Brown do it, but I decided since this is only his third week on the job, it probably wouldn't be wise at this point. So I'm going to go ahead as the official budget officer. We're a little bit different in that the city of Keizer does appoint the finance director as the budget officer. In some cities, the city manager is the budget officer. So we do things a little bit differently here, or I guess not as typical as some of the other places go. Anyway, I just want to start off and say it's very good to be here with all of you in person. After several years of doing this remotely and just seeing heads on screens, this really warms my heart to think that we're all gathered here to talk about the budget. So, yes, I am an accountant. So I'm pleased to present to you the annual budget for the city of Keizer for fiscal year 22-23. A couple of agenda kind of items. There was a couple of handouts. There's one that it should look fairly familiar. This is the ARPA list. This is a take-home for you. We don't need to talk about it tonight, but we will be probably talking about it tomorrow. The other item is the thick agenda packet. This has the agenda. It also has the minutes, and it also has the outside budget requests. This is also primarily a take-home for you if you want to. We'll be talking about the majority of the budget requests that we received from outside agencies and groups, most likely tomorrow. So with that, turning our attention back to the budget, overall, the city of Keizer is in a relatively stable financial position, all things considered. The COVID-19 pandemic has had some impact on us. Like the region, state, and nation, we're continuing to recover from the economic and the operational impacts of the pandemic. Specifically, revenues such as franchise fees and intergovernmental revenues such as liquor taxes are slowly returning to their pre-pandemic levels. In some cases, this is good. Say a gas tax, people are out driving, so our gas tax revenue is increasing significantly. And in other cases, it's bad, such as franchise fees and intergovernmental revenues. As we're starting to see now, it looks like some of those have peaked during the current year and are starting to drop back to their historical trends as people go back to work. Also, I think there's less day drinking now. So now that we're all meeting in person, we can't get away with that stuff anymore. Turning back to the services of the city, we did have some things that were shuttered most of fiscal year 2021, such as the event center, parks, city hall. All of these are up and open again, open to the general public. As we start looking towards the future, the fiscal year 22-23 budget it's really been prepared with several priorities, specifically continuing to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic to the extent that it still lingers with us. Specifically, ARPA funding has been allocated to several local partners who've been negatively impacted by the pandemic. We've also spent quite a bit and have quite a bit more to spend from a city standpoint, reacting to it ourselves. Along those lines, we're maintaining and restoring existing services. We're funding to bring back our event center, community center staffing. That was the area the city was hit the hardest by during the pandemic. And again, that was shuttered in October 2020, and we haven't seen a lot of significant revenue come in until just recently. We're also looking at providing funds to recover and speed up the hiring process. As our past tradition has been, we typically hold positions open, try to recover the accruals that get paid out when people retire. We have allocated some funds to reduce that time period. We're also looking at continued capital investment in all of the city services. There's about $750,000 in stormwater repairs. There's $300,000 in water main line replacements, $2.1 million in street projects, $500,000 in park projects, about $300,000 in vehicles, and about $300,000 in IT projects throughout the budget. So we're really looking to double down and invest into our infrastructure. We're also looking to maximize the benefit of the $8.8 million American Rescue Plan Act, also known as ARPA grant funds. We've had several robust discussions about those, so I won't bore you with a lot of the details, but we will be talking about them once again tomorrow. We're also looking at some of the city council's short-term goals to see if we can knock some of those out. We do have money allocated for strategic planning, urban growth boundary studies, those type of things. Overall, the fiscal year 22-23 budget is approximately $59.4 million. I know that really pales in comparison to the school district of, what, $1.4 billion. Maybe someday we'll get to that size. That would be really exciting. Much of the $9 million increase over the prior year is due to the ARPA funding. That's a significant pickup. That's a one-time pickup for the city. The budget also includes $12.5 million in capital spending. As I indicated before, we are doubling down on our infrastructure. It includes $1.8 million in debt service payments. In order to sustain the existing service levels and fund some of the necessary capital improvements, our budget does include a planned 4% water rate increase that we discussed at the long-range planning meeting. There's also an anticipated 3% sewer rate increase. The city of Keizer is part of a regional sewer system. The city of Salem manages that system and does a cost of service rate analysis every other year, and we're actually in the middle of that process right now. They've promised that we won't see anything over a 3%, but it could be lower than that, so fingers crossed. We're also proposing a $1 per month increase in the police services fee. That's also, as we discussed at the long-range planning meeting. This is somewhat of a catch-up adjustment as we've really delayed those increases as long as we realistically could. As we talked about last year, we were supposed to have a $2 increase last year, but we did settle for just a $1. The fiscal year 22-23 budget provides for 102 full-time employees. That's compared to 101 full-time employees during fiscal year 21-22. The increase in staffing is a result of reopening the event center. We're bringing back an event center administrative support position. That position has been vacant since October 2020. This is really in support of getting our event center back to its pre-COVID usage levels. With respect to staffing, the budget provides a 3% cost of living increase for non-represented employees, 2.5% for members of the Keizer Police Association, and 4% for members of the Local 737. This is really in contrast to the Consumer Price Index that we track, which came in at 5.5%. Unfortunately, while the city does strive to provide our employees the best we possibly can, we also have to be cognizant of our revenue streams and our revenue limitations. The budget provides a 5% increase in health insurance benefits, which is significantly lower than the city has experienced in the past, which have ranged from 7 to 10% increases. The increase is based on the city's claim history and includes an allowance for employees changing plans or changing coverage levels. The good news for the city is that the public employee retirement system biannual rate changes don't happen this year. The bad news is they do happen next year. Unfortunately, based on the preliminary analysis provided to us back in December, the rate increase is probably going to amount to about $545,000. That's just from the rate changes themselves, not from anything that the city of Keizer has done. That was based off of reasonable rate of return for the investment stock market. Unfortunately, 2022 has not been super great for the stock market so far. So I'm a little bit concerned. Of that 545,382 directly or indirectly relates to the general fund. So when you start thinking about what that means, that's about the cost of 2 police officers in our general fund. That increase is going to be a significant challenge that I'm going to be trying to squirrel away as many dollars as I can to try to reduce that impact next year. I do want to thank all of you. I know this is a significant time commitment over a short period of time. We are doing back-to-back, almost daily doubles, I guess, to crank out our budget this year. I do understand that it is a significant commitment for all of you, and I appreciate the time that you're spending with us. I also appreciate all my fellow department heads and the rest of the city staff. The budget doesn't just happen by itself, and it's not just a finance document. This is really an all-city effort. There's a lot of folks that have their hands in this budget document, and I appreciate that. So that's the end of the city manager budget. I do have a few things that I typically bring up every year, and we can do this before we move to the public testimony time. Just want to remind everyone that Oregon does have fairly strict laws regarding municipal budget process. These are designed to promote transparency through notice requirements and also public involvement. That's really why we're here tonight. The budget is presented in total, however, each fund that we'll go through is a standalone entity. That really means that we can't take money from one fund necessarily and use it to pay for something else. So all of our water revenue fees stay with the water revenues. We can't use those to pay for police or for parks. So that really means the city has about 20 plus different businesses that we're trying to manage. And again, the emphasis for the city is on the ability to provide services into the future, really a long-term focus. When you start talking about a corporation and their budget, it's much more of a short-term focus. How can we meet our quarterly earnings expectations? And then you think about your personal budget, it's kind of a combination of both. How do we meet the immediate, get food on the table, but also provide for retirement? So having said that, there are strict penalties associated with going over in our budget. So if we overspend in certain areas, actually in every area, we have to come back and submit a written plan to the city council on remediation efforts, and then we also have to forward that plan to the state. So as we go through, we have a tendency to be somewhat conservative in our budgeting. We budget each line item. However, as a budget committee, you'll really be reviewing each by program. Really, the totals are the pieces that matter for you folks, not necessarily the individual line items. We do budget to the nearest $100. This can result in some kind of crazy percentage changes at times, especially when you're dealing with small dollar numbers. If anything does stand out, however, feel free to ask questions. The more questions that you ask, the more engaging this process can be, and I think the better quality product we'll have at the end. When we do start talking about outside budget requests or requests for funding from people outside of the city itself, I do want to say you don't necessarily need to look for places to cut to add those things in. We're looking more for policy type of decisions from you folks of whether you like the idea or not and want us to include it in the budget. I'll go ahead and myself find where we can sneak that in. With respect to the requests that we do have for this year, we do have the availability to include all of them if you so choose. So that'll be at your option. We do try to budget really on a status quo for service levels. We like to keep things, the increase or decrease of service levels is really a guidance and a decision that comes from you folks. So that's why when we start to look at the outside requests, we'll include what they asked for last year and what was included in last year's budget, but there is an opportunity for you folks to make recommendations. I think that really summarizes all of my main budget points and city manager message. At this point, is there any questions that I could address? And if not, we can move to public testimony.
All right, there appear to be no questions from the Budget Committee. So this time is provided for public testimony. Tonight we are considering the Administrative Services Funds and the Public Works Fund. Tomorrow night we'll be looking at the General Service Funds and the Special Purpose Funds. But you're welcome to speak on anything you'd like. Is there any, I don't have anybody signed up to speak for public testimony, but is there anybody who would like to do so? All right. Rhonda Rich of the West Keizer Neighborhood Association.
Good evening. I'll be brief. My name's Rhonda Rich, and I'm president of the West Keizer Neighborhood Association. I just want to thank you for the funds that you have given us in the past. We use it all for communicating to our about 3,200 households. Just to let you know, we have 3 active neighborhood associations, maybe 4, and another one coming on board. So it's pretty exciting to getting neighborhood associations developing in our city. And so I just, we're asking for a little bit of increase this year due to our brochures, which we have to get printed about every 3 years. So just want to thank you, and that's it.
Great, thank you, Rhonda. Okay. Any questions for Rhonda Rich? Right, thank you. I'd also like to read into the record an email from Sherry Gottfried of the Southeast Keizer Neighborhood Association. And basically she is letting us know that they're going to be suspending summer meetings and a request for the approval of funds as is in the packet. So I want to read that in the record as well. Anyone else like to speak as part of public comment tonight? All right, seeing none, we will go on to the budget presentations and deliberations. And Mr. Wood, I'm going to turn that over to you.
Thank you. Before we get into the Administrative Service Fund, there's a few pages that I would like to highlight as we move along. If you could turn with me to page 4, and that's in section 1.
Binder or packet?
Binder.
Okay.
We'll just need the binder for the rest of the night.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
On page 4 is the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. Just want to highlight this. This is the 8th year in a row that the city has received this award. This is not given out to everyone. It does require a fair amount of effort to achieve. City of Keizer has a long history of receiving a similar award for our annual financial statements. However, this has been a newer addition to the fold. And this is one of the ways that we provide transparency and accountability to the general public. This sets a standard that we try to achieve every time. As I indicated, in order to achieve this, we really have to create a budget document that serves as a policy document, a communications medium, an operations guide, and a financial plan. And our budget has been reviewed by peers and has come back and checked the box on all of those. So we'll continue to strive to achieve this every year going forward, or at least as long as I'm around. So I just want to bring that to your attention.
Thank you very much. Largely due to your efforts, and we are so lucky to have you. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And again, this is a group effort, so it's not just my document, it's all of our documents, so thank you.
But mostly yours.
Yeah, mostly mine. I get to print the paper, so I guess there's that. The next area I'd like to turn to is page 11. As I indicated, there is a very strict budget process in the state of Oregon. These pages, I just want to highlight that this really kind of outlines the process that we have to go through. Let me see, I just lost my brain here. So the state requirements are really laid out to establish standard procedures for all governments to go through, outline programs and services and the fiscal policy to carry them out, and then also provide estimates of revenues, expenditures, and proposed tax levies, if anything. Our process here is also to inform citizens and encourage citizen involvement in the budget formulation before the city council actually adopts it. So that's the main piece of what I want to get out of that page. If you turn to page 13.
Madam Chair.
Councilor Kohler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Wood, on page 10, this talks about economic indicators. What does MWIC and MWSH stand for?
That's a good question. They're private, I think they're real estate companies. So they're, I don't know, probably
Mountain
names
West
or something.
Investment Corporation.
What?
Councilor, Mr. Johnson?
I believe Councilor Starr got it too. My guess, those are both Mountain West companies, Mountain West Investment Corporation, Mountain West, and, I used to know the SH.
Shareholder?
Senior housing.
Senior Housing. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr.
Bonus
Johnson.
points.
And Councilor Starr. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
So moving on to page 13 at the bottom, this really talks about what the budget committee's responsibilities are. Your folks' responsibility is to receive the proposed budget, receive any public testimony, if anything, discuss and deliberate on the budget, and then if there's anything that you need to follow up on, request from us additional information. Then specify the property tax amounts or rates, and then approve the proposed budget with changes as you see fit. So that's your role. I guess my role is to present this in a way that's meaningful for you.
I'd like to ask a question. Can you explain what the term ad valorem means? Because clearly we don't have any control over the
Sales tax.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to page 62.
It's probably
more appropriately an excise tax than a sales, but it's a tax assessed against your property.
Okay, so ad valorem is related to property tax?
It is, yeah.
Property tax.
It's also called an excise.
Okay, but we don't have any control over raising that per thousand rate, right? We don't
That
have
is
any
correct,
control
we do
of the-
not.
Okay. Any other questions about that particular item? All right, thank you.
It's Latin, I don't know.
A lot
Page
of money.
62, as I indicated, the city staffing is currently 102 full-time employees. You can see at the bottom of page 62, the administrative specialist position. We were going from 0 last year to 1 this year. That really is the primary change in city staffing. On page 63, however, we do have a senior planner position that's been open for a while. We're still assessing whether that position needs to come back or not. So at this point, we don't have it included in the budget, but it may be a future discussion at some point, just to give you that heads up. Moving on to page 66, this is a summary of wages and employee benefits. So as you can see in line 1, throughout this budget, you're going to see wage increases that are going to range between 1% and 5%. Having said that, there are going to be places where things look a little bit different. That's because during the previous year, we elected to put into place a program where we allow employees to retire for PERS sake and then come back and work for the city. So that is a specific program that the state put into play, and we have until December. The employees can come back to work full-time without any restrictions until December 31st, 2024. The benefit to the city is that we no longer have to pay the employee 6% match. And then the second benefit to the city is that the amount that we've had to pay for the employer portion of the retirement now goes to pay down our unfunded liability with PERS. Last time I checked our unfunded, I don't even want to talk about the unfunded liability right now. Never mind. Anyway, with respect to this program, the city has saved about $30,000 over the last 9 or so months from not paying the employee 6%, and we've paid down about $120,000 on our unfunded pension liability. So it is making a difference. Unfortunately, it's probably slower than the impact of the poor stock market right now. So with that, let's go ahead and move to section 6. This is where the real budget deliberations start. If you turn to page 93, this is a summary of the Administrative Services Fund. And the Administrative Services, you can think of this as the overhead fund. This includes all the departments such as the Finance Department, the City Recorder Department, Human Resources, City Manager, City Attorney, all of the core administrative things that get then spread out to all of the different funds. So a piece of this will hit the general fund, a piece of this will hit the street fund, and a piece of this will hit the water, and so on. We've tried to keep costs as minimal as we possibly can in here. We are seeing an overall about a 4% increase in the costs associated here. Some of the things I want to point out, the city attorney, city recorders, and human resources, those are all going to be impacted by the PERS retire, rehire. So you're going to see some interesting wage numbers in those areas specifically. Within the finance area, within the non-departmental and the utility billing, we did do some reallocation of resources, so you're going to see some interesting numbers there. That's when we let go, when there was a retirement, we did reallocate some of the utility billing staff to cover some of the administrative type of tasks throughout the city. With that, in the materials and services area, if you're looking at line 24, you're going to see a fairly large increase. Again, that's liability insurance. With the inflation that we've seen over the last couple of years, our liability insurance company is finding if there is issues, damages, that kind of a thing, they're coming in a lot higher than what they've seen in the past. So, of course, they're passing along those rate increases to everyone else. So, thank you. With respect to line 25, the city manager, you're going to see a significant drop in costs there. That's because we did go through a recruitment and had recruiting type of costs. Within the city attorney's area, you're going to see an increase in some of the materials and services. This is for some consulting type of stuff, hopefully to get some projects moving, that kind of a thing that we've been working on for a while. You're also going to see a line increase in line 31, the finance utility billing. This is mostly postage, printing, credit card type of fees, and that's the result of the COVID pandemic where people are doing a lot more banking, that kind of stuff online rather than mailing in checks. So with that, let's go ahead and move to the first budget, the city manager's office budget, page 95. And this is going to give you a more detailed look into what the city manager's office is looking like. From personal services standpoint, we're looking at about a 3.2% increase. And again, that's the standard cost of living increase primarily of the 3% for the non-represented employees. If you look down in line 21, labor attorney contractual services, again, that's the decrease I just mentioned with respect to recruitment costs. Other than that, I don't know if, Mr. Brown, do you have anything you want to add?
No.
Good. With that, if there's any questions on the city manager's budget, I'd be willing to entertain those.
Are there any questions? All right.
Now, typically in the past, as we've gone through some of these, some areas we've made a motion to approve the individual budgets. You can do that by department for these ones, or you can wait till the administrative services is completely done.
All right, does anybody have any opinion on that?
Seems like it would go faster if we did it as a group.
Yeah, I'm kind of inclined to just approve it as a fund, the administrative services fund, unless,
Anyone objects?
are there any objections?
You're in charge.
All right, we'll go ahead and approve that by fund then.
Okay. Moving on to page 97, the city attorney's office. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Tim. Members of the Budget Committee. This budget is pretty similar to the ones we've had in the past. As Tim mentioned just a little while ago, on materials and services starting at line 19, mainly due to an increase in the outside counsel budget or the legal services contract. So we have a total increase of about $6,000 there. Other than that, the changes have been pretty minor. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions about the city attorney's office? All right, thank you. Let's proceed.
Moving on to the city recorder's department, I'll turn it over to Ms. Davis.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Budget Committee members. There's not much change in this budget either. You will see there is some percentage changes due to one person in my department that is taking advantage of the PERS early retirement program. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
All right, Councilor Kohler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Davis, how's the budget affected with adding on your a new person to help with the Civic Center?
That person is in the community center budget, correct?
That is correct. We'll actually get to that piece tomorrow night, so.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Separate line, thank you.
Lots of dollars, lots of dollars.
Big bucks.
All right, are there any other questions for Ms. Davis or for Mr. Wood in this section? All right.
Okay. Moving on to the Human Resources Department, page 101. I'll turn it over to Ms. DePina.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Members of the Budget Committee, similar to what you've heard, our numbers are fairly consistent. There are two line items I would mention that are, looks like large increases, but they're small, kind of a representation of what Tim said earlier when you're talking about percentages. Line 20, safety and wellness, increased simply because we have to replace 2 AED batteries this year. And that's $1,300. They're
Wow.
spindly little boogers.
Well, we
And
need
then
that.
line 24, medical testing, we have an increase in the cost of our bloodborne pathogen program. And that's a program that we contract with a third party that provides on-call nursing services in case any of our employees get stuck with a needle or get exposed to any sort of pathogen on the job. So that's 24/7, evenings, weekends, et cetera. And that's it. Any questions?
All right, thank you. Are there, Madam Mayor?
Thank you very much. Two questions. One is, we have what's called a SHARP certification, and that has been earned again by the city. And does that have an impact on our,
All of us? Okay,
what's that?
closer.
Can you hear me now? All right.
Are you on?
Yes.
Okay.
Got my microphone on. So for the SHARP certification, does that help with reducing some of the costs that we have in other areas? Because I know it takes a tremendous amount of work to do it, but we're one of the few, I think, only city.
We are the only city in the state of Oregon that is currently certified through the SHARP program through Oregon OSHA. That does take some time for us to do that and maintain certification. And with respect to the black and white, does our insurance provider give us a break on that? The answer is unfortunately no. I, of course, went to them immediately and said, look what we did. You need to reduce our bill, right? No, but one would argue that because we have all of those systems in place and place such a high priority, that we are safer in general overall with our employees and therefore reduce costs that way. I would also say that we have had applicants actually mention to us that one of the reasons they applied is because they saw that we have that certification, and their past experience with other employers is that they don't take safety seriously.
That is outstanding. Thank you. And then the other question I have is on the, this might come up later under IT, but the Human Resources Information System, HRIS, is that going to come up later, or is this the time to talk about it?
We can talk about it now. We are looking at several different alternatives at this point. We did approve one last year that was kind of a low end, I guess not necessarily low end, but low cost through our existing service provider. It appears to not really meet our needs, so we're going to be seeking something else out.
And what is your timeline on that, since that's a need we've been pursuing for quite some time?
Soon.
And given supply chain and responsiveness of contractors, actually, I accept that answer. But
Unfortunately, we're going to have to go through a semi-formal, I guess an informal request for proposal process. So we do have someone that we are like their package for what we've seen so far, but we do need to go out and do some more shopping.
quickly,
Yes.
and that is that reflected in the budget to be able to absorb the cost that you anticipate for bringing that system online?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, are there, Mr. Sangster?
Thank you. I appreciate the comment on safety for employees. As an old state risk manager, I appreciate that. Who is our carrier?
Our workers' comp carrier is SAFE. It just switched to SAFE this last year. It used to be city-county insurance, but they have discontinued doing workers' comp.
Okay. I'm disappointed that we didn't get some breaks, but we'll work on it, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I continue to remind them each year, hey, guess what? We are unique in that we've done this. So they're still just getting to know us now, so maybe we'll have some headway by next year.
I've had history with them, so I know.
Thank you, Mr. Sangster, and happy birthday.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions for Mr. Pina? All right.
Moving on to the finance non-departmental. This is page 103. With respect to staffing, we did have a retirement this year within my group, which is rather unusual. So we're in the midst of backfilling, and there's been a few shuffles around that we're getting taken care of. So with that, other than the staffing changes, there's not a lot of changes that are going on. Our contractual services are increasing a little bit. Unfortunately, we're at the end of our contract for audit services, so we're going to have to be doing a request for proposal for audit services. So for those of you folks that also serve on the audit committee, you'll be actively involved in that process as well. With that, if there's any additional questions on the finance non-departmental?
Do you expect an increase or a significant increase in those audit services costs?
Unfortunately, probably yes. We did find out that one of the auditing firms that does quite a bit of municipal work has decided to go into consulting rather than auditing. So there's only a handful of firms, and from what I understand, they're all overwhelmed with work right now.
All right, I have I guess, question/comment on the overtime. That is just largely due to the fact that we are doing so much with so little, yes?
That would be correct, yes.
All right, and how's everyone doing on that? Are we able to maintain this, or is this something that we need? I mean, you look over the past years, and from the 2020, 2021, where we were at 46 versus up to 2,000, that's a pretty significant increase. Is that something that is a trend, or is that?
Yes and no. Like I say, we are in a transition period where we've lost some staffing that we've had for over 20 years. So we're got a little bit of a break where people are working a little bit of overtime right now. I do anticipate once we get back to full staffing, we'll probably see that number drop again.
That makes sense. Thank you. Thank you. All right, any other questions for this section?
Okay, moving on to the finance information systems. Still have the same 2 employees that we've had for a significant amount of time. With respect to ongoing projects, the biggest one that we'll be looking at into the future is replacing our phone system. A lot of our phone system came from the previous building here, so I think it's some of the oldest assets that are in this building. We're going to be replacing it with a internet-type based phone, so folks can take calls if they have their laptops with them from wherever they are at in the world. So we're going to be moving into the 21st century, I guess, with our phone system. It's going to be good. Other than that, most of the computer software and maintenance is continuing on with what we currently have. Not a lot of additional software packages that we're looking at adding in the near future. So with that, if there's any additional questions.
Madam Mayor.
You're saying that there weren't some software packages that you're not looking at replacing, but Outlook, are we able to keep improving on that one? Because that is a significant part of the workload that we do, and making sure we have the latest and greatest is actually a cost saver. So are we able to
yes.
continue to?
We are looking at, when we get to the ARPA funds, that's going to be part of our improvement in cybersecurity. Our biggest risk as a city right now really is our email system. So we're looking at several different options of probably taking it to the cloud and improving that functionality. So yes.
Okay, and then back to my question earlier regarding the human resources information system, then that's tied in somewhat to the finance system, is that correct?
That is correct.
So this will affect both budgets, and that has been accounted for in both budgets, correct?
Yes, it has.
I do have a question about the email system. You were saying you're thinking about moving it to the cloud. Is it currently on a local server being backed up, or?
Yes, it is currently on the local server being backed up.
And what is, I guess, my husband works in technology, so this is why I'm asking these kinds of questions. It seems like perhaps there might be a little more vulnerability for getting hacked if it were on the cloud as opposed to on a server where it can be backed up on a regular basis and easily restored.
One would assume that it's a good question to ask. Unfortunately, Microsoft is not supporting local server installations very well anymore. We've had several instances over the last year and a half or so where there have been known vulnerabilities in their on-premise Microsoft Outlook, and Microsoft wasn't doing anything about it.
Okay.
So that resulted in probably 2 cybersecurity scares for us here that nothing happened, nothing came of it. But we did, I guess, if you think of graffiti, we got tagged a couple times.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions on this, in this area? All right.
Okay. Moving on to the finance utility billing section. Again, the increase in payroll personnel services is a result of pulling back the utility billing folks back to doing just utility billing work. And again, you're going to see an increase in line 20, contractual services. That's really the increase that we're seeing with electronic card payments, credit cards, online bill pay services, that type of thing. With that, if there's any additional questions.
I have a question. For those contractual services, certainly we've used them more lately, but are those fairly stable in terms of the fees for that, or do they go up and down according to?
There is a little bit of variability in credit card fees at times. With respect to the online bill pay services itself, we'll see an annual increase of 3 to 5% just in the base fees. But there is some impact on credit card fees going up, yes. And I would anticipate as interest rates continue to go up, we'll probably continue to see that impact.
Okay, and that is something that we as a city absorb rather than passing that on to
That is correct.
the citizens. So I think that's important to note as well. All right, any other questions in this section?
Moving on to Public Works Non-Departmental, page 109. I'll turn it over to Mr. Lawyer.
Thank you, Tim. Madam Chair and Budget Committee. This fund captures all the costs associated with employees that are paid from multiple funds out of the Public Works funds, such as myself and a couple of my field staff, as well as the operational cost to run the Public Works shop. All of the field staff have a workstation over there, computer, phone, and all of the utilities that go along with operating that facility. Really, the only change this year is just in the capital outlay section, shop improvements. Last year, we did some parking lot maintenance. This year, we're going to update all the lighting, both inside and out of that facility to LED lighting. So we'll have some ongoing power savings costs after that is completed. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Okay.
Moving on to Public Works Civic Center facilities. Again, I'll pass it over to Mr. Lawyer.
Thank you again, Tim. This is the fund that tracks the cost to operate and maintain the Civic Center facility. It does include the community center rooms. For the general stuff, specific improvements or replacement items for the community center is charged to that fund. The really change, or there's a significant percentage change in the capital outlay this year, primarily because we're going to replace we call them the pergolas, or the trellises outside of the building on each police department and city hall for the break room areas. To sum it up, it was a poor design when the building was built. They used glue lam beams outside, and the glue lams are failing. They're rotted up on the top and coming apart in the lamination. And so this project will replace all of the wood members out there with steel, be a long-term correction to that. And the other item in that part of the budget is to purchase a lift for our maintenance folks to change light bulbs in the lobby, instead of dragging out a 25-foot plus ladder that takes 2.5 people to stand up and take down. It's real, honestly, a safety issue trying to set that ladder up. And so the fix to that is to purchase a lift to get them up there to replace the light bulbs.
Which we should be able to get an insurance discount for, yes?
I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Madam Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would furnishings for the community center be here or under the community center line item? The living room. doesn't have his furniture back yet.
We're working on that. I would anticipate probably by the end of the year, you'll see furniture out there again. That will be, what's that?
Something washable?
Correct. We did have some issues with some unfriendly folks coming in and damaging our furniture. So we are looking at something that's easily movable and also easily cleanable.
So is that out of this fund or the committee?
That will
the
be
Civic
out
Center
of
fund?
the Public Works Civic Center Facilities Fund, yes.
Okay.
So this out of this one?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And is there a budget for that? Because I'm looking at the capital outlay, would that be considered part of capital outlay?
Yes, it will be.
Okay. So it has some, so when I'm looking at the increase, we didn't spend a lot this year, but bring it back up to the 113, because I think this was being anticipated before COVID hit, that we were going to have to do some of those projects anyway.
That is correct.
Okay, so that's why it's back up to 113, so we can go ahead and purchase the furnishings
Correct.
and the lift, et cetera.
Since we're on that page, I'd also like to highlight line 38. We are continuing to increase our Civic Center improvements reserve. So currently we're at 250 and we're going to be moving to 300,000.
Thank you. And the carpet is lovely. All right, any other questions in this section? All right.
Moving on to the final area of the Administrative Services Fund, this is general administration. This accounts for a lot of the office supplies, city council expenses, association memberships, those kind of things. The large increase, unfortunately, this year is liability insurance. And again, this is because the liability insurance provider, city county, has identified that when there is an issue and you have to do the replacement of something, there's been a lot of inflation that's been going on. So the cost to replace anything, repair anything has skyrocketed. And of course, they're passing that increase on to us as well. So we're looking at about a 20% increase in our liability insurance. With that, if there's any additional questions.
All right, any questions? All right, any questions on the whole before we consider the Administrative Services Fund? All right, Madam Vice Chair.
I
Oh,
move.
sorry, Mr. Rizzulli.
Yes, one question.
Microphone.
I'm sorry, what was the difference between line 33 and 38
On which?
on page 111?
Okay, so the Civic Center improvements and the Civic Center improvements, they're both labeled that.
Sure.
Mr. Wood?
Line 33 is actually the expense line item. So that's where you'll see current year expenditures. Line 38 is a reserve, so that's our contingency that we've been trying to build up over the last few years to take care of things like roofs and HVAC systems and that kind of stuff. So we can't spend the contingency line item, line 38, without getting city council approval, but we can spend up to the amounts in line 33.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? All right,
I move that the Budget Committee approve the Administrative Services Fund as presented.
any seconds?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the Administrative Service Fund. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Administrative Services Fund is approved. All right, moving on to the Public Works Funds, and we do need to consider these individually, yes?
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
So with the street fund, as I mentioned before, we are seeing a return to normal with our gas tax revenue. There was a year or two where it was getting a little scary as we saw our revenues declining there. However, we do seem to be back on the even path forward, so all is good. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Lawyer to talk about the rest of the street fund.
Thank you, Tim. Madam Chair, Budget Committee, the street fund overall remains pretty much consistent with last year. The changes in this fund are primarily in the capital outlay section. I'll kind of highlight some of those projects. Line 65 includes cost for the Vernon Lane project entering into the right-of-way phase. This project has funding through SCATS, the Salem Keizer Area Transportation Study. And that's federal funds administered through ODOT. So that project is in design phase now, and next fiscal year we'll go into the, well, if things progress as I hope they will, into the acquisition or the right-of-way property acquisition phase. And so line 65 represents the city's match portion of that grant funding. Line 67's primarily resurfacing of city streets. That'll be this calendar year, this summer, about 12,000 feet or 2.33 miles. The bid was $1.2 million for that. The remainder in that line will be for ADA ramp upgrades for paving for the following summer. Whenever we resurface a street, we're required by federal law to update all of the corner ramps on all the streets so they meet the current ADA standards. Line 68 is another SCATS-funded project. It's a fiber optic communications upgrade to the traffic signals on River Road. This project is being done by the City of Salem for the City of Keizer, and that part of that funding represents our match for that project for the next fiscal year. And the other item on that line is the installation of a rapid flashing beacon at a pedestrian crossing on Shamar Road here, northeast, right out here by the Heritage Building. Something that's been discussed and recommended by the Traffic Safety Bikeways Pedestrian Committee. And I've also had contact with a couple of residents that have requested, they actually requested an additional crosswalk. And looking at the opportunities, I felt it was better and safer to put in the rapid flashing beacon at that one location than to add a crosswalk, because both of the residents that I talked to were trying to get to either the Civic Center or the library at the Heritage Building. Well, they already have a crosswalk. They get across the street, so it's not making them walk any farther or out of their way. It's just using a crosswalk at a much safer location. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
First of all, the Wheatland Road study
Yes.
that we recently adopted, that I assume is a few years in the future in terms of execution?
Yes, that project has been applied for funding through SCATS. It has gone through the scoring phase and has been sent on to ODOT for scoping. What that means is it hasn't been awarded grant funding yet, but it's in the top portions of the projects. And so they will get it scoped, and then the final decision will be made on whether it receives funding or not. That funding won't be available until 2024. 24 to 27 is that window of opportunity for those funds.
Okay, and we will be doing matching funds presumably, and
Yes.
that will be in?
Yes, we'll have a match. The matching amount for the SCATS funding is 10.27%, and we applied for the minimum match on that project. Some projects will add, we call it overmatch, if it's something we really, really want. And we really, really want Wheatland Road, don't get me wrong, but that construction number is so high that we just didn't have the ability to overmatch that project.
Okay.
And that's phase one of the Wheatland Road project, which phase one consists of Jay's Drive at the north end to Aldridge Drive at the south end. Excuse me. And that represents just about half the lineal feet of the corridor. Not quite, but just about.
Okay, thank you. My other question relates to there has been talk about traffic mitigating, I'm going to say devices, but alternatives for some of the West Keizer areas. And I know that we have yet to do traffic studies and so forth for those. But under which of these budget items would that come? And are those budgeted for? Or how would we approach that?
The two things that I'm working on right now with getting some data for is the addition of a stop sign at Shoreline and Cumming, or Shoreline and Dearborn, excuse me. And then some measure on Cummings Lane to reduce speeds. One of them's been kind of talked about as a tabletop or not a speed bump.
Speed table.
But more of if you're familiar with Alder Drive, where Weddell and Claggett schools are, right in the middle of the schools, there's a raised portion of the road. That's a crosswalk. Something along those lines is what's being discussed. I have not allocated any money for that in this next year's budget. because we don't have the data to know whether it's supported or approved by council or anything. That's not a huge number in the scope of the street fund. And so if we get through the process and it is deemed needed, necessary, desired, I'll find a way to make it happen.
So that could come under contingency funds or other places, right?
Could possibly, or it could be scale back resurfacing a little bit, do less ADA ramps. There's some massaging within that fund.
Key part is you can make that happen if it is deemed necessary.
I believe I can
appreciate
unless there's some outlandish reason I can't think of that would drive costs exorbitant. But I can't think of anything off the top of my head or even giving it quite a bit of thought that would drive the cost of that ridiculously high.
Okay. Another example of the speed tables is in the new parking lots of McNary.
Yes.
So that's just another example.
And the addition of a stop sign is operational cost, so.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Lawyer, this probably applies to all the funds, but how are you feeling about gas prices?
I hate them.
I was gonna say, I had to take out a second mortgage to fill up my pickup yesterday.
Honestly, the interesting thing about gas prices is what the effect it does have on the street fund can be fairly minimal because the gas tax is the gas tax. It's based on the number of gallons sold. So if the price goes up and people reduce their driving because of the price of gas, then we will see an impact. But historically, and prices haven't been this high in the past for very long, and I recognize that. But historically, even when gas prices rise, we don't see a significant change in our revenue.
I'm a little more concerned about you having to buy gas for your vehicles.
I am too. And we've increased our budget numbers in all of the funds to accommodate for that. I hope we got it high enough. I really do. Thankfully, in a fund of this size, the cost of gasoline and diesel in this fund is not a big number. And so I'm pretty comfortable we can accomplish that. We may have to sharpen our pencil in some other areas for that, but you know, it's a wild card right now, like we all know, so.
Thank you.
And I would assume that would apply to police vehicles as well. So another consideration. All right, Hirsch, Mr. Sangster, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Line item 4, of course, it's close to my heart, is the bike donations, and it shows at 0. Since we're on TV and public, that's not tax dollars, but that's donations. And for the last 2 years, we really haven't been able to do helmet fittings and buying helmets. So we were able to use that $42 to buy helmets for the event coming up, but we're going to need donations from the community and individuals and corporations for this next fiscal year. So I don't want people to look at that and saying, well, there's no money, we're not going to worry, the city isn't giving it. We get this from donations to keep the helmet fund for kids going.
And Mr. Sangster, where would somebody go if they wanted to donate? How would they go about doing that?
Tim, do you want to?
Sure. Well, there's multiple places they could go. I do believe, is it Scott Cycles? Do they take donations there as well? But primary place would be you could come to City Hall, talk to the utility billing folks here, the city services folks, and we can take a donation for that program. You just have to come into City Hall, give us a call, let us know that it's for the bike helmet donation fund, and we will take care of it.
We have an event coming up this next Saturday in City Hall, a bike skills fair with helmets. So donations can be made at that event too.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And those donations will go through the city?
Yes.
So, okay, so you would write a check to the city specifying being earmarked for bicycle safety donation.
Yeah.
Right, fantastic, thank you. Any other questions?
Okay.
All right.
I move that the Budget Committee approve the Public Works Street Fund.
Any second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the Budget Committee approve the Public Works Street Fund. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Moving on to the Street Lighting District Fund, this is page 119. The city has over 200 different street lighting districts. These are broken up into little neighborhoods. As each neighborhood was developed, one of the requirements to become a neighborhood is to put in streetlights. So the city will front the cost of putting in those streetlights, front the cost of the electricity, and then on an annual basis, we'll turn around and bill each of the residents in that neighborhood for those costs. Not a lot of activity as the number of new neighborhoods in Keizer has slowed down significantly. However, we do typically plan on 1 to 2 new lighting districts each year. Brings in about $400,000 worth of revenue, and we pretty much spend most of that on electrical costs each year. With that, if there's any additional questions?
Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Not too long ago, I had a conversation with the county assessor about consolidating these large number of little street lighting districts. And he's done that work with unincorporated Marion County areas that are urbanized the size of Keizer. Have you looked at what it would mean in terms of efficiencies for bookkeeping, making this simpler, and possibly making it simpler to look at finishing out the system in neighborhoods that don't have street lights, and because of our current barriers created through our process, aren't likely to get street lights? And that was loaded, I know.
I'm not sure where to start with that.
Start with the consolidation.
I have talked with the same person about consolidation, and we have some unique issues here in Keizer that unfortunately make it a little bit different than the unincorporated Marion County area. So we need to figure out how to work through those legal loopholes to get that type of a process accomplished.
Would it be to our advantage, do you believe, to make that simpler, or just leave it as is? Or is that a bigger question to ponder?
Well, from a staffing standpoint here at the city, it's not a major project for us. So on an annual basis, we're talking maybe 5 to 6 hours worth of work.
Okay. Thank you.
And so just to be clear, many people see this as an equity issue. Why do the new parts of Keizer, have streetlights and the old parts don't? Well, everybody pays for the streetlights that they have in some way or another. And so the mayor's question was getting to how can we make this more equitable in terms of the improvements and dealing with some of the gaps and the obstacles that we have with that. So.
And I think that would be a conversation to put onto the list for our council goals. I think it is on our list this year, but follow up on that conversation, because we do have areas around McNary High School and some older neighborhoods that were not built with streetlights. And because of the way we structure how to initiate a street lighting district based on the response of property owners, when you have an area with a lot of rentals, they just ignore the letter and that's it. So I think that might be a larger conversation, and then circle back on how we might be able to find some efficiencies to complete the system. But that's a bigger policy issue than the street lighting districts currently.
Correct.
Okay. I'll put on my to-do list to circle back.
Well, thank you. All right, any other questions on this section?
I move that the Budget Committee approve the Street Lighting District's budget as presented.
Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the Street Lighting District Public Works Fund. Any discussion? Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Moving on to the Transportation Improvement Fund, I'll turn it over to Mr. Lawyer.
Thank you, Tim. Madam Chair, Budget Committee. This fund revenue for this fund comes from systems development fees paid by all new development in Keizer, both residential, multifamily, and commercial development in Keizer. Goes into this fund to be used for future major transportation systems projects. The one identified project that we've been waiting 15 years now for is the southbound I-5 on-ramp widening. Waiting for ODOT to come to us and say, it's time to build it, Keizer. We're committed to participate in that project. Since we haven't heard from them yet, we haven't allocated any funding specifically for that project. However, you will notice that all of the funds available in this budget are in the unanticipated expenses line item. If ODOT comes to us and says, it's time now, we will come back to council and get authorization for the funds for our share of that project. There are some other improvement projects available for this funding in the transportation systems plan. However, there hasn't been a need to build those yet. There are some projects that would be nice to use these funds for, but they're not on the project list, and that's something that as staff we're looking at updating here in the next few months to make some of these funds available for some of those projects. So we'll be bringing that back to council and a proposal, a recommendation to update the project list. So be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I have one. In terms of that southbound Shmawa Road exit, how much, I mean, clearly with the casino just in the very, very nascent stages, how much would that project be impacted by that? Or do we have yet to do the transportation analysis to figure that out?
I haven't seen that data, so I'm not sure. This requirement for the additional southbound on-ramp lane was for the Keizer Station development. That's where the requirement came from. And again, we're just waiting on ODOT to come to us and say it's time to build it. I honestly, personally, and professionally don't know how it can be built because you've got the parkway taken off in a very short distance. The room for the cars to merge and maneuver if they're in the wrong lane and don't want to go onto the parkway but want to go onto the freeway. I don't know how it can be done, honestly, without major modification. ODOT may have some ideas I can't see, but I've looked at it for a lot of years and I still can't figure out how it can really function safely. And that may be the main holdup, honestly. That may be why they haven't come to us yet. But
So the bottom line, that's in ODOT's court right now.
That's in ODOT's court,
We
that's
have
right.
it there, but we're not anticipating any
that's
movement on
correct.
that soon. Okay, Madam Mayor.
And in case anybody's wondering if we're just sitting here waiting on them, no, there has been outreach to ODOT asking the question, and it's been met with not now, or no, we're not looking at that at this time.
Right.
And I don't think there's anybody who travels that particular interchange who would disagree with what you said, Mr. Lawyer, about adding another lane and the weave that would create all sorts of traffic nightmares and possibly crashes.
Yes.
Would not be a good thing, so.
Right. So, yeah, and I have pretty regular communication with ODOT staff on various different projects. And I mention that to them every once in a while, and I get not now, or I don't know, or we'll see, or, something. It's not forgotten about. It just hasn't risen to a level on their end that says it's time.
Thank you.
I move that the Budget Committee approve the Public Works Offsite Transportation Improvement Fund.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the Public Works Transportation Improvement Fund. Oh, sorry. Mr. Johnson. Oh, okay. Mr. Lawyer first.
The original motion mentioned the off-site transportation improvement fund. This is the transportation improvement fund. There are
I'm
two
sorry.
separate funds.
Okay.
So I'll revise. I move that the Budget Committee approve the Transportation Improvement Fund.
Okay. We good, Mr. Johnson? Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the Public Works Transportation Improvement Fund. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Fund passes.
Page 121 is just for your information. There's no action that needs to be taken. Just because there's some historical information that's going to be rolling off next year, this one will end up going away next year. So with that, we can move on to page 122, the Stormwater Fund, and I'll again turn it over to Mr. Lawyer.
Thank you, Tim. This year in the Stormwater Fund, we are not proposing a rate increase. This is the second year in a row. We have no need for a rate increase in this fund. Some of the highlights, at least for me, it's a real highlight. This fund is, or this division is now fully staffed. We've had a hard time for the last, 6 years, hiring staff for these positions, primarily due to just available people interested in the work. We've had some people come in and decide it wasn't for them and move on to other things. But now it's fully staffed and functioning very well and making great progress and achieving goals that we've been trying to get to for a number of years. So you'll see a little bit of changes in the personnel because of that. And again, it's just mainly because it's fully staffed now for a full fiscal year. The other change in that fund is in the capital improvement line 62. Have funding allocated $400,000 for a wetlands enhancement project along Claggett Creek. That'll be on the property on the east side of Claggett Creek, across from Claggett Creek Park. That's property that was deeded to the city by the Herber family when they did the zone change and everything for the apartments that are getting ready to be constructed up on Verta Lane. That project, I think most of you probably know that area of property is used in the wintertime and unfortunately this time of year because of all the rain we've had, by a lot of waterfowl and migratory birds. And the goal is to enhance that property, enhance those wetlands, make it a passive public use, includes maybe a boardwalk, hopefully a boardwalk down across through there, to get the public access to nature in the middle of the city. The plan or the design right now does include a connection from the apartment project into that property, from their private property. I believe that'll be just for the apartment folks. The public will have access both at Dearborn and Shamawa to go through the property. It will not include any kind of crossing of Claggett Creek. The main reason for that is it's extremely expensive because it's all floodway and floodplain. And in my opinion, I think it's kind of dangerous. We don't really want people trying to cross that kind of water at any time of the year. And plus it will disrupt the wildlife. The more activity you have down there, the more disruption to the wildlife. The other part of that line item is repair and replacement projects that we're working on identification through our video inspection program of the storm drain system. My staff have identified a few potential projects right now, and they're just doing some more evaluation to see which one rises to the top of the high priority list. So be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Councilor Starr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Lawyer, what is line number 56, consumer confidence report and public education's going up by 50%?
Yes.
Consumer confidence report?
That
I see a smile.
I smile because I was going to touch this on the water fund. The consumer confidence report is something that's required by the state to be distributed by the water purveyors in the state to their customers. We take advantage of that and fund a portion of that publication with the stormwater fund for public education.
Just got this in the mail.
Water quality.
Water quality report, correct. The term in the water world is consumer confidence report. That's the requirement term, okay? And I chuckled because I was going to touch on that. It just came out in the mail. I got mine on Friday. It's the annual water quality report. We do have a requirement in the stormwater section, stormwater fund, to do public involvement, public education. That requirement comes from our National Pollutant Discharge Elimination Systems, or NPDES permit, for our phase 2 stormwater system that we get from DEQ. The increase in the storm fund, primarily in that line item, is primarily related to being fully staffed and having the people to do the education and the public outreach and the available funding to let them do more.
Thank you.
You bet.
And that is all what we talked about in our last Stormwater Advisory Committee meeting. So, yes, and they do phenomenal work, and I have a little list of my acronyms that I keep right there at all times during those meetings, and so.
And I'm really excited. I think the community will see some pretty exciting opportunities for education and public involvement, nature-based, that are directly related to the stormwater utility and water quality across the board.
And just as a specific example, the Soggy Day in the Park and what they're doing with the Clag Creek watershed, a lot of that comes under the education, public education.
Absolutely.
It's not just about that, it's also about educating developers and builders and all of those entities as well.
Right.
And public officials.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. I have a question. Oh, Councilor Herrera.
Just out of curiosity, thank you, Madam Chair. Out of curiosity, Bill, on the stormwater fully staffed, is that 3 people now, or?
It's 5.
Wow.
And
who's the head of that department now?
Carrie Blaylock is the division manager. It's Carrie and 3 other staff, senior environmental technician, education coordinator, and compliance coordinator. Those are 2 separate positions, and then our GIS technician. So a total of 5 in that division.
That's cool. Only 2 when I was around.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I have a question about the wetlands area project. So this line item 62 is for its establishment, and then for the maintenance, will that come under the Claggett Creek? Will it be considered part of Claggett Creek Park, or where's the maintenance?
We're not sure if it's going to be considered park property yet or not. Myself and the former community development director kind of disagreed on what it should be labeled. I'm looking over at Shane, he knows about this.
Okay.
In one of the earlier studies done by Nate in the community development department, and I don't remember which one it was, HSN, buildable lands inventory, housing need, I don't remember.
So many.
There was a part of that report that said we were deficient in parkland a little bit. And by adding, I think it's 8 acres over there, if we added that 8 acres as into the inventory, then it screwed that whole report up, okay? I don't know where it stands right now on whether that report is still valid or being redone. To me, it really doesn't matter, okay? It doesn't matter to me what we label it. The ongoing maintenance at best will be shared between parks and stormwater. At worst will be wholly a stormwater cost.
Okay.
And we are looking at grant opportunities for both construction, design and construction, and ongoing maintenance for that. Once we get the design to a certain point, we can start applying for grants, OWAB, Division of State Lands, different agencies and opportunities out there. And we'll put together a robust package that I will be able to share with the council and everybody budget committee on the long-term ongoing operation of that property.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Witham, do you want to weigh in on that at all?
Nope.
Smart man.
No, I am aware, and I think that there's a few different things at play, and Bill and I can have some conversations about that because there are some changes now that are actually beginning to happen. One of the things with buildable lands inventories, it is difficult because a lot of it is mathematical. And so in a city like ours, where we all know we're somewhat deficient in a lot of different land types, it does create some problems, but we have a new updated Parks Master Plan that also talks about parks needs, and our most recent housing needs analysis and buildable lands inventory. Generally, when we look at those, we do not really count land that's in the 100-year floodplain as developable land. So I don't know that it's a huge issue if we were to suck that into the Parks Department, but I'll have to do some more. Will and I will have to argue some more about that.
And if I may, looking at that, first of all, let me back up just a second. That acquisition of that property has been identified in the Parks Master Plan from the 2009 Parks Master Plan update. I have been eyeing that property as a potential for the city for longer than that. When we were deeded that property, I was really excited because I knew we now had an opportunity to make a enhanced nature area right in the middle of the city. The benefit to the environment and the system and the city, in my opinion, is greater on the stormwater side than the park side. because wetlands clean water and help clean Clagger Creek and make that all better habitat for eternity. While it will be available for the public for passive use, we really don't want the public in there on an intensive basis. So that detracts from park use, if you know what I mean. So when I say I'm not too worried about what the designation is, one way or the other, I'll figure out the right place to put the funding and it'll be there.
Fantastic, thank you. Any other questions on this fund?
I move that the Budget Committee approve the Public Works Stormwater Fund.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the Budget Committee approve the Public Works Stormwater Fund. Any further discussion? Ms. London, do you have a comment, or you? I'm just, okay, I guess not. I'm seeing your hand.
I'm sorry, it's really bothering me.
Oh.
I'm just pulling it up to try and get the blood flow going.
No problem. I just wanted to make sure that you didn't have some further discussion. Thank you. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes.
Moving on to the sewer fund, page 125. For the folks at home, as you probably are very well aware of, sewer can make up to about 2/3 of your city services bill every other month. Sewer is rather expensive. We are part of the regional system with the city of Salem. We're in the middle of doing a cost of service analysis right now. This is a collaborative effort between Keizer, Salem, and a few other handful of other cities as well. The preliminary reports indicate that we'll probably see around a 3% increase. We won't know the final number until later in the summer. If it comes back something different, we'll probably have to come back and do some kind of a supplemental budget adjustment. But this fund is to account for that. Basically, we bill on behalf of the city of Salem, and then we turn around and remit a part of that money back to the city of Salem to pay for sewer fees. With that, if there's any additional questions.
All right, 3% may seem like a lot to swallow, but we do not want to cut services in this particular area.
It can get icky fast.
Yeah, that would stink.
Absolutely. All right, any questions in this area? All right.
I move that the Budget Committee approve the Public Works Sewer Fund.
Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded that the Budget Committee approve the Public Works Sewer Fund. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Moving on to the Sewer Reserve Fund, page 127. This obviously goes with the regular sewer fund. So the Sewer Reserve, we do collect some SDC funds as there's new development going on. Right now, we don't have any plans for any current projects to use these funds. However, we have allocated the resources that are available in the event that that does happen. So with that, if there's any additional questions.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So I know we have a master plan for our water system. Does that also include the condition of the sewer pipes and infrastructure?
Those would be through the city of Salem.
Okay, so do we have a reasonably recent assessment of the condition of the system? Like all the pipes and infrastructure? Bill's smiling.
I have not seen from the city of Salem a recent system-wide assessment of the sewer system in Keizer. The city of Salem is responsible for all maintenance of the sewer system. That's what we pay the fees for, okay? If there's a sewer break in Keizer, in a line in Keizer, or a need to replace a pipe because it's old, it is disintegrating in Keizer, the city of Salem pays for that, takes care of that. Again, that's paid through our sewer fees. This fund that we're talking about right now is the fund to extend what we call trunk sewer lines, okay? There's really only one trunk line left to build in Keizer. That's on Windsor Island Road from Lock Haven north to about the sewer treatment plant. That will serve property primarily on the east side of Windsor Island Road that's currently Filbert Orchard. If that property ever develops, they need sewer service. That's where this fund will help pay for that trunk line.
Thank you very much.
All right. Any other questions?
I move that the Budget Committee approve the Public Works Sewer Reserve Fund.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the Budget Committee approve the Public Works Sewer Reserve Fund. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Moving on to the water fund, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Lawyer.
Thank you once again, Tim. Madam Chair and Budget Committee, I've used this term multiple times in the past, not yet tonight, so I'm going to go ahead and use it. This fund remains remarkably similar to last year. Not a lot of changes. We did just last week have a meeting with one of our distributors talking about supply chain issues and costs, primarily related around pipe and fire hydrants. It's not pretty. Fire hydrants might be as much as 6 months out. What that presents a problem for is any new development that needs to add fire hydrants or has to include hydrants. They're a long ways out. Pipe is not quite as bad, but it's out there a ways. All of the manufacturers indicate that will improve. They just don't know how soon and how much. So we're working with folks and updating them. And this is known to the contractors out there in the world. This is not a surprise to anybody. Some of the lead times on fire hydrants I was a bit surprised about. Operationally for us, it's not a huge impact. The stuff that we need on a regular basis to maintain the water system is still pretty readily available. We are talking about ordering some fire hydrants and putting them in the yard just to have them. So when one gets hit and we have to replace it, we can replace it within 6 months. Doesn't look very good to not have a hydrant for fire protection in a neighborhood for 6 months. So you'll see some increased costs because of materials that cost primarily. Gasoline's another one. Like I said earlier, we don't know how long that's going to last. I don't see it going down to normal, if there is such a thing, prices ever again. That's my own feeling, based on what I think. It's no data to back that up. Really, the only other thing I want to point out within this fund, on line 61, pump maintenance, we budget a fair amount of money to cover routine maintenance, and if we have a pump fail, we only had one fail so far this year. That's a Keizer station pump, and it failed recently. So while that seems like maybe over budgeting, not too many years ago we had 3 fail in a year, and so I just want to point out that it's there and available for when we have a failure. On the capital outlay side of things, line 73 is to replace a 2003 service vehicle. I take great pride in getting a lot of years of service out of our vehicles. I think 19 years says it all pretty well. The other thing I just found out last week, in the current fiscal year, the water fund is partially funding a new VACON truck, the big blue suck truck as we call it. We just found out that we're pretty much know now we're not going to get that truck before the end of June. I'm waiting for the final confirmation. And what that means is we'll come back to this council with a budget adjustment to move those funds from the current fiscal year into next fiscal year. It would have been included in here had I known earlier, but we just found out last week. And it's still not 100% confirmed, but instinctively I think we won't see it until probably late July, early August. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I just want to clarify a couple things. So that 4% increase that you talked about in the initial overview is on line 11. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yes.
Okay. And also just to clarify, that this water and sewer bill is bi-monthly. So if this feels like a hard hit every other month, that's because you're not getting one the other month. So I think that's an important thing to understand. So just budget accordingly. And this is one of the few things that you do have control over in terms of your usage. Many times a year, Mr. Wood will remind us of the season where we are conserving in order to affect our water rates. So that is something that we can't control as we monitor our usage. All right, Mr. Lawyer.
The other thing I wanted to mention, Councilor Starr asked about the consumer confidence report in the stormwater fund. You won't see an increase in the water fund for that same item, and that is because the water education has plenty of funding to do the water education. The increase in the stormwater fund is because we're now fully staffed in that area, and we want to add to that program specifically around stormwater and environmental education. So that's why you don't see the change in this fund.
Just so I understand, the capital in the ARPA funds it's a separate budget, am I missing?
No, that's a separate fund.
Separate fund, so it's not gonna be reflected in the document?
Not in the water fund directly, no.
We'll be talking about the ARPA fund tomorrow, so it'll be its own standalone conversation.
Its own standalone, that's what, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I move that the Budget Committee approve the Public Works Water Fund.
Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded that the Budget Committee approve the Public Works Water Fund. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Water Facility Replacement Fund, Mr. Lawyer.
Thanks, Tim. This fund, the Water Facility Replacement Fund, is the project fund. Revenues from this fund are derived from system development fees charged to new connections to the water system. And I say it that way because that includes not only development, but existing homes in Keizer that have a private well that want to connect to the water system, okay? There's fewer and fewer of those in there now than there were 10 years ago, but there's still some out there. So if they choose or need to connect to the water system, they have to pay the system development charge, okay? The highlights from this fund, mainline replacements. You'll notice that there's $910,000 allocated in the line item when we only budgeted 300. Well, with the ARPA funds being available, we had planned to use Water Facility Replacement Fund revenues for the Meadows Pump Station filter plant design and construction. It was deemed that was eligible for ARPA funds early on, benefit to the entire community, and so I pivoted those funds to mainline replacements because that's a need that also benefits the entire community in a long-term way because we don't now have to generate the funds through rates to pay for those mainline replacements. So it was kind of a win-win on two fronts there. For next fiscal year, we're going to construct the Meadows filter plant and also drill a new well at the Wrights facility. Over the last few months, the well at the Wrights facility has failed, not the pump, the well itself, and it's been deemed, I'll just tell you, that's been the money pit in my life since the time that well was drilled in the beginning. And I don't remember off the top of my head when that was. I choose to forget because it's been too many years. It's been sucking money from us. It wasn't necessarily drilled incorrectly. It was just a problem hole, and we get those every once in a while. So we're going to abandon that one, move over a few feet, probably about 30 or 40 feet, and drill a new well, use a little different method in how we develop that well, and get that back online this next fiscal year. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Madam Mayor?
Okay, going back to the ARPA list, isn't the Wrightsville one that we're funding with ARPA funds, or was that?
Yes, ARPA funds, that's
That is
correct.
ARPA. So the well itself, and then any additional needs that it has, but that will come from the water facility replacement, or will that be entirely through ARPA?
I would say probably the facility fund. That site, if everything goes well, bad choice of words, I'm sorry. If everything goes as we hope it will in drilling the new well, the additional cost to connect it up to the existing system there are minimal. That'll basically be part of the well construction because we have the rest of the facilities there, distributions, pumps, filters, everything's already there. We'll just hook it up to that system. So it should be minimal cost to get the new well online into the system.
And thank you for mentioning filters, so that has filtration for the sulfur, manganese, all the goodies that
Well,
we love.
that filtration system and the one at Meadows, we have two filter systems currently in the distribution system. Both of them were installed primarily to take care of hydrogen sulfides, okay? Rotten egg smell. That's a nuisance. It's not a health hazard, but it's surely an aesthetic no-no for water quality. In addition to dealing with the hydrogen sulfides, they also do remove some levels of manganese and iron. Okay, so we don't have a manganese and iron removal system. We have an iron and manganese reduction system, okay? At both the Wright site and the Lacey Court site, and we're adding that to the Meadows site.
Thank you.
Councilor Kohler.
Thank you, Chair Reed. Mr. Lawyer, would you say that our city water system, as far as wells and the production volume that we have, is more than adequate for our city needs
Yes, absolutely.
for years to come?
For the build out of the urban growth boundary. While the current master plan, which by date may be getting close to needing to be updated by projects, it doesn't really rise up because most of the projects are mainline replacements. There is a project stated in there for another reservoir for storage for peak demands. But what we've seen through the years since that master plan was created in 2009 is that one, the population didn't grow as fast as was projected, and two, the water demands are not increasing as projected. We really don't understand why, other on the demand side of things, other than, and even when this was looked at in 2009, the requirement for low flow faucets and 2.5 gallon shower heads and all that were in place. I don't know if it's water efficient irrigation systems for landscaping. I'm not quite sure, but we just haven't seen, not only Keizer, just in the industry, we have not seen the demand on water increase as the projections indicated it should. So you couple all that together and the need for another reservoir just doesn't really seem to exist for quite some time in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have a question, just to clarify something you were saying a little ways back. You don't anticipate any disruption in water service as we go from the old to the new, as far as getting the old back?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. We have enough production capability that I'm not concerned. The Wrights well being offline is not a big concern because for the last few years, it's only put out a couple hundred gallons a minute when it used to do 400 or 500. And so I don't want to belittle 200 gallons a minute, don't get me wrong. But when we have wells that do 2,200 gallons a minute, 200 is not a major concern for me.
Okay, good, thank you. Well-designed system.
Yes.
All right. Okay, any other questions?
All right, I move that the Budget Committee approve the Public Works Water Facility Replacement Fund.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that the Budget Committee approve the Public Works Water Facility Replacement Fund. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Moving on to the Park Services Fund, page 132. I'll turn that over to Mr. Lawyer again.
And once again, thank you, Tim. Madam Chair and Budget Committee, Parks Services Fund encompasses all of the operations for the parks system within Keizer. Revenues are derived from both general fund and parks services fees. The bigger portion of that funding is the park services fee. Changes for this next fiscal year, primarily line 42, temporary labor. That's directly related to higher labor costs and the need for increase in hours for this next year. In the capital outlay section, line 65, or 63, excuse me, we have a need to purchase a new mower, 72-inch zero-turn mower. And then line 64, we want to update the systems development Systems development charge methodology. That report basically dictates how we can spend systems development fees. In discussion with consultants through the master plan updating process, I learned that there's been changes to the state laws surrounding the use of systems development fees, and currently we can only use up to 13.6% of a project cost can come from systems development fees. If we go through the process to update the methodology, it's very, very likely that that will increase to 30% of a project cost, which just greatly enhances our ability to use those funds for projects in the park system. In the current methodology, it's projects, there's certain projects identified that those funds can be used for. If we update the methodology, it becomes more of a percentage of any project. So there's a real benefit in freeing up the ability to use those funds by updating the methodology. So we plan to do that next year. I've indicated funding of $50,000. I really don't think it'll be that much, but watching what costs have done over the last 6 months, I decided I wanted to make sure I had plenty of allocation to fund that, that project. The other thing in there is to replace the play structure at Ben Miller Park, including ADA access upgrades. That would be also have the rubberized surfacing around the entire playground. And then the other project is to expand the road/trail to the boat-in campground at Keizer Rapids Park, $100,000. That will enable people to get from what we call the disc golf parking lot down to the river and back through the trees and back up to the boat ramp and or the dog park and big toy area on a hard surface. So those are all those projects were outlined in our 3 to 5 year priority plan. The one change is we moved Ben Miller Park from next year to this year because we saw the need was greater, and we delayed Bob Newton Family Park replacement a year because our plan is to not only just replace that play structure, but do comprehensive ADA upgrades throughout Bob Newton Park at the same time, and may even include, we're still studying that, looking at space, include the addition of some pickleball courts at Bob Newton, because the pickleballers love the tennis courts there. The tennis players don't necessarily love the pickleballers. And so we're looking at trying to find space to see if we can accommodate the pickleball there in addition to the tennis court. So be happy to answer any questions.
All right, Councilor Starr.
Just a clarification question, Mr. Lawyer. Line 64, it notes, in the notes, it says extend the columns and replace 2 shade sails at the big toy. Is that because the expenditure is going to be in this next fiscal year? Because is that what we just voted on?
Yes,
And
you
it's
approved
just-
that contract, and I had hoped to get that done this year, but it looks like it's not going to be finished until next fiscal year.
Thank you.
When we approved that, talking to the contractor, I had really excited and thought they were going to be able to get right on it, but there's been some holdups in getting the contract finalized, so at this point, we probably won't get it done, unfortunately, this fiscal year.
So just as a follow-up, so is that, one of the big concerns with that was the closure, the necessity of closing the park. So is that going to we're not going to have to worry about that this summer or anytime soon?
To do the project, we're going to have to close the big toy.
But with this delay, is that closure going to be a little less painful, I guess?
No, with this delay, it's probably going to be more painful.
Oh, all right.
I'm sorry to say, because my goal was to have it closed literally right now.
Okay.
And I thought we were going to be able to get there, but we're not getting there. I still have a glimmer of hope that this is all going to be resolved in the next week or so, and they can go to work and we'll be done by the end of June, but I'm not counting on it.
All right, thank you.
If we don't, we're going to have serious discussions with the contractor about timing, because I really don't want to have to close that big toy for 6 weeks
In the summer.
in
Yeah,
July.
That would be really sad.
So let's get the contract finalized, get that in place, so we can have those discussions.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Madam Mayor.
So I was gonna bring it up when we were talking about the parks fee and the long-range plan. We have the 5-year plan that was adopted with the fee, with the, plans for how we were going to address the maintenance needs and the facility needs. So thinking ahead, years 6 through 10, are we gonna start those conversations now that we have the new master plan to start calling out the projects we want to queue up for 6 through 10?
Yes. As I've stated from the beginning of the parks fee implementation and the adoption, if you will, of the 3 to 5 year plan, when we get close to the end of the 3 to 5 years, which we're getting there right now, we really need to step back and look at staffing needs and what's it going to take to maintain all the things that we've now improved and replaced and built within the park system. Robert and I are having those discussions currently. One of the things that stands out, we're doing what we call the lower field project at Keizer Rapids Park. It's 8 acres of new mowing, weekly mowing that we don't have to do right now. That's just a prime example of additional maintenance needs, among other things that we've done. But that's one that's real visible and obvious and easy to understand. So we're having those discussions so we can figure out first what the staffing needs are going to be moving forward. That will affect the capital improvement monies available, and ultimately, at some point, could necessitate the need to increase the parks fee. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we have a need to increase the fee yet for probably 2 or 3 more years. With current operations, current plans that we know we have in front of us. But the discussions are being had so we can develop a plan. So by this time next year, we'll have that plan developed and created, and we can be having a discussion at the Long Range Planning Task Force stage of what we see as the needs for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
And that very likely then some outreach through the parks board, talk to the community about where our parks are and what we're hearing the community for prioritization. Some
Yes.
of that outreach as well.
Absolutely, yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Councilor Starr?
Sorry, one more question. I noticed that one of the accomplishments we had was the pathway lighting at Bear Park in 21-22. I know we've talked a little bit about at the Parks Board about lighting at Keizer Rotary. Is that included in this budget?
The Bear Park path lighting has turned out to be an extreme challenge because we had hoped to use a solar-powered system for that, and to date, we haven't found anything under about $60,000 in a solar-powered system. So we're pivoting and looking back to PGE power availability and monthly cost and cost to get the power there. We're not quite sure where we're going to go with that. In terms of the lighting at the amphitheater, that's discussion that I need to have one-on-one with Mr. Holland, who's doing the concert series. In previous discussions, primarily with the mayor, this is, I'm going to say, mood lighting, as opposed to path safety lighting. Well, then I completely misunderstood, Madam Mayor. I need to get with you and understand what the desires are, because I completely misunderstood something then.
My apologies then for not communicating clearly. When events are out there, the concert series or any other event, once the sun goes down, it is dark. And so it's being able to have sufficient lighting for people to go along the pathway from the amphitheater back to the parking lots, and to be able to move about the amphitheater area safely. It is very dark and shadowy, and it's difficult to move about safely. So once the event is over, to be able to have those lights, something you can turn on or that will come on as the area gets darker. So that was the concern that I've had regarding safety in being able to move through that area.
Well, then I completely misunderstood, and I think we need to have some more discussion. I have some real concerns about that.
Thank you.
Okay, I had a couple questions. First of all, the line 64 with the updated SDC methodology, Is that going to require some kind of Parks Master Plan amendment if, once you get that figured out? Or is that just a matter of shuffling numbers around, or?
No, that really will be tied into the updated Parks Master Plan. As part of the master plan update process, one of the tasks was to look at the methodology and provide a recommendation as, should it be updated or not? Okay? And basically the recommendation was, you probably should look at it.
Okay.
And as I said in my statements, in talking with a couple of consultants, it seems like that's a real advantage to the city to go through that update process. But it won't change the master plan at all. The master plan is adopted, and the methodology will be adopted to be not part of the master plan, but recognize the master plan.
Okay, thank you. And I also just wanted to point out that when we established the parks fee and the police fee, part of that, the consideration of that was that we would look at that every year to make sure that it was fulfilling our needs. And so that was part of what Mayor Clark brought up, and I just wanted to clarify that as well. All right, any questions on this section?
I move that the Budget Committee approve the General Fund Park Services Fund.
No.
Oh, wait.
Parks, Public Works, Park Services.
The Public Works Park Services Fund. I apologize.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that the Budget Committee approve the Public Works Park Services Fund. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
All right, we have, how many are we?
You have 11.
Okay, so we have 10 approved and 1 opposed. Motion passes. Thank you.
Moving on to the final fund for the night, the Park Improvement Fund, page 135. Mr. Lawyer.
Thank you, Tim. Park Improvement Fund revenues are SDC fees collected from single-family and multifamily developments, new developments in Keizer. Commercial projects are not assessed parks SDCs in Keizer. This fund, as I mentioned earlier, is constrained in how we can use it by the methodology. And so what I've done is for this fund for next year is look at projects that we have planned to do and apportion the appropriate amount of those projects that can be paid for from this fund into this fund. And that's primarily projects at Keizer Rapids Park, the pathway project down there. And in the current year, the 2 picnic shelters that are going at the Big Toy that should be done by the end of June, those are partially funded out of this fund. And the lower field project that I mentioned earlier is also partially funded from this fund. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, Mr. Sangster.
Madam, thank you. Mr. Lawyer, is this the fund that's used to develop new parks?
Yes, part of it. Under the current methodology, there's some parks identified that could be developed 100% from this fund, and some parks that could be developed partially from this fund.
So for my education, with the new Northwest Keizer Neighborhood Association, which has no park, and I know we're not talking this fiscal year, but this would be where we would start looking for money?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions?
I move that the Budget Committee approve the Public Works Park Improvement Fund.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the Budget Committee approve the Public Works Parks Improvement Fund. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. And that brings us to the end of our agenda for this evening. Mr. Wood, is there anything else you would like to?
I would just say, let's be prepared to talk about our ARPA funds tomorrow and our general fund, and that should be the meat of our conversations tomorrow. We do have a few special revenue funds, but not a lot of significant activity in most of those. So with that, that's all I have tonight.
All right, and then the appropriate thing would be to recess until tomorrow night.
You can adjourn.
I can adjourn.
You can
All right. Meeting adjourned. It is 8:03 and the meeting is adjourned.